Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Tuesday, the 27th of November, 2012. I'm Tony Paniagua. The son of cotton farmers in Alabama eventually went to law school and life in business before establishing an organization that has been working on behalf of civil rights for decades. Tonight, we bring you an interview with the founder and chief trial attorney of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Morris Dees spoke at the University of Arizona's College of Law during a visit to Tucson earlier this month. Mr. Morris Dees, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Tony.
So what is the main mission of the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Well, the center started in 1970 doing civil rights work. We like to say we were seeking justice back in the days when the civil rights movement was just ending. Then we added on a program to track hate groups. We saw a rise in hate groups, so we say that mission is fighting hate. We file lawsuits all over the country, in Oregon, in Idaho, and in the South against different groups that are harming people, minorities. And then the last mission, I guess, is teaching acceptance and tolerance, because we saw that a lot of these crimes committed by young people and hate groups and others were committed by those people that, had you reached them first with a message of acceptance and tolerance, they might not have become haters.
So you had a publishing company with a business partner.
Yeah.
What inspired you to get involved in this area of social life? Why not just make money and relax and not become controversial?
Millard Fuller, who went on to form Habitat for Humanity, and I formed a company in college. We ended up publishing books, ironically the largest publisher of cookbooks in America. And we sold it to Times Mirror, the Los Angeles Times. He went on to form Habitat, and I went on to form Southern Poverty Law. Actually, I've been a lawyer my whole life in terms of my feelings, and so when I sold the company, I continued what I'd been doing at the company. I filed suits to integrate things in Alabama, state troopers and other things before we ever founded the law center. So it was a good chance for me to get some money aside and move on. But I also used another skill that all our books were sold by mail. It was a big direct mail sales of books at that time. And so I understood direct mail. So in order to fund the Poverty Law Center, we reached out to millions and millions of Americans across the country with direct mail appeals. And now we have about 350,000 people who support our 200 or so employees and 43 lawyers.
But what inspired you from a personal perspective? Was there some kind of an awakening that were you just not happy with what you were seeing?
Tony, I grew up on a small cotton farm. My people didn't own any land when I was a little boy. And I had to get out in the fields and pick cotton along with my mother and my dad, in the field with black people. And I learned black people and African Americans, I learned them as people, not as them over there. So when I fortunate enough to go to law school, I went to a segregated school that had integrated stuff back then. I'm 76 years old. I was able to get out and I opened my law practice, and I didn't get any business from the rich folks. They didn't know who I was. The people that I grew up with came to see me. And one guy came in and wanted to be a state trooper. Alabama had 650 white troopers, no blacks. And I represented Philip Paradise and filed a lawsuit that integrated the Alabama state troopers for the first time. And that was just a few years after George Wallace used them to beat the marchers up at Selma Bridge.
So obviously you've led a pretty controversial life along the way in the past few decades.
Well, I guess they're controversial. The South has really changed, quite honestly. A lot of the bias and prejudice we used to have in the South, we see it all over the country, and our work is pretty well accepted in the South. But if you look at this last presidential election, you'll see that there's a lot of, I'll call it racism, I'll be honest with you, around the country, because President Obama got really less than 35% or so of the white vote in most of the old Confederate states, and also all out through the Midwest. And I think you'd have to attribute that to his race, because I think if Bill Clinton had been running this time, he'd have done substantially better. So we got a lot to overcome. And I think the thing that's got America so alarmed is the racial demographic change. This state has about 37% Latinos and blacks combined. And by the year 2040, this state will have 75% Latinos. And people like myself, I'm not a citizen of the state, but we'd be in a big majority. America will have a majority of what is now minorities by the year 2040 also. This election was bellwether for that. It showed you what happened when those people put their votes together. They didn't abandon Obama like people were predicting they would. And you add the coalition of women and all the women's issues and the gay lesbian issues and poor people's issues, put them together. That's what the Democratic Party that I grew up with, that Franklin Roosevelt saved us after the Depression, that's what it's all about. I think the Republicans are painting themselves into a really bad hole.
And obviously the demographics are only going to continue to change. They're going to become more diverse. Do you see?
There's no question. Well, you know, look, my people came from Ireland. And when they got here, they said we couldn't speak English. They tortured us in Boston, hung out Latinos. I mean, get this straight, they hung my people, the Irish, saying that they were taking American jobs. Sound familiar, right? And you know, it took a while for my people to become accepted. And had I said in 1860 that one of our ancestors is going to become president of the United States, I'd have been booed off the stage. But I predicted before this century's over, you're going to see a Latino president of the United States. It's going to happen. It's really going to happen.
And do you think that the United States will reach a point where people really are, you know, we've heard this before, colorblind, where they just see a person as opposed to ethnicity, last name, race?
And well, you know, colorblindness is not a good idea, quite honestly. I think we have to accept the differences among people and build on those differences, because your person's ethnicity, their background, their culture, their race is very significant. And I think that, you know, colorblindness sounds like a good concept, but yes, I think there'll be a time when people will be more able to join together. But we're always going to have us's and them's, and those us's and them's may change. In areas that are going to become 80% Latino, then hopefully they'll vote for non-Latinos. They may not. In the South right now, we're seeing areas that are now 60 and 70% African-American in counties, and they want to elect a white. And so whites wouldn't elect a black back then when the whites had the power. So, you know, two wrongs don't make a right. And if we're going to build bridges across those divides that separate us and share power, we've got to accept people based on their, you know, content of their character and their ability instead of the color of their skin, as Dr. King said.
You mentioned us and thems, but even in some families in this election, there was an us and them in that you had males voting one way and females voting a different way.
Yeah. Well, I think in America, families, you know, you can write books on families, but in my own family, I know some of my relatives and close relatives voted for Obama. And honestly, you know, it's hard to argue politics like it's hard to argue religion, but I was saying, well, you're voting against your own best interest. You know, I'm financially well off. I had a big company. I sold my company. You think that I'd be for Romney, but I don't see it that way. Historically, those people who have been most prosperous are people who supported the democratic concepts. Things trickle up, not down. And I think the public got it this time, and I think we're going to have 4 years of progress.
Let's talk a bit about the organizations or the programs that you have as part of the Southern Poverty Law Center. One of them is the Intelligence Project that began in 1980. What is that all about?
Well, the Intelligence Project tracks hate groups the best we can. They don't register the Chamber of Commerce, so you don't know all their groups and members, but we track them, and there's been a strong rise in hate groups since Obama became president, from like doubled almost up to over 1,000 all over the country, plus these border vigilante groups and the so-called militia groups that Timothy McVeigh was a part of. It's a big explosion of those. So we track them, keep up with them, and then we report on them, write about them, and do documentaries and all that kind of stuff to educate the public and law enforcement. And then we file lawsuits against hate groups using data that we've gathered. We don't violate anybody's constitutional rights gathering data. Information is just there. We work closely with law enforcement, and we've been able to bring bankrupt some of the largest hate groups in America, the Aryan Nations in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the White Aryan Resistance in California, the United Klans of America that blew up the church in Birmingham, killed those 4 little Sunday school girls. In the last 15 or 20 years, we've had 9 or 10 major cases. So that's a big focus of our work, and one that I think I'm probably the most proud of.
And then another program that began in 1990, it's called Teaching Tolerance. What is that one all about?
Well, I saw when we were suing these hate groups, and I looked at the young people that were committing these hate crimes, not the older guys, you know, burning a black church or doing something. And I thought to myself, well, if somebody had to reach those people, they're not stupid, they're smart, they're looking for recognition in these groups, trying to do something to please the older ones, that if you could get to them, and a Boy Scout leader gotten to them, or a community group or whatever, they'll have a better shot at it. And also, I think you have to understand that 97-8% of all hate crimes in America and biased acts are not committed by people who are part of hate groups. It's just your next door neighbor. You know, somebody going out beaner hopping in Long Island, New York, meaning beat up a Latino. 5 kids did it, white kids and 1 black with them. and they killed Marcelo Luceros. He was a great guy. He was a documented person. Stabbed him and killed him. Now they're all in prison. They couldn't find a hate group if they wanted to. So we want to get our message of tolerance and acceptance across. Now 80,000 schools use our material. All these programs are funded by the 340,000 supporters that Southern Poverty Law Center has.
What keeps you going? You're in your mid-70s, you've mentioned, and you could easily just be playing golf somewhere, right? Enjoying relaxing moments, but you keep working. What's the inspiration?
I just enjoy my work. I'm a farmer. I grew up on a farm and still have a farm, not as active as it was, but I've never seen a farmer, quit farming. They just drop behind the plow, so to speak. And actually, as a lawyer, I got great people, 43 lawyers. I'm in a situation now that I can kind of guide them on new projects and ideas and motivate them and try to teach some of the young lawyers. That's what keeps me young, and all my grandkids. So, I wouldn't be looking for another occupation or a job. I enjoy my hobbies. I just got through touring Utah and Arizona on my motorcycle. So, I got a lot going on.
And obviously you've had some difficulties along the way because of the organization. What would you like to say about that?
Well, it's... I don't want to brag, not bragging, I guess, I don't know, moan or something, but, 33 people have gone to federal prison or jails in state or counties around the country for trying to kill me or harm our property. Our building was burned by the Klan in 1984 for a lawsuit that we had against the Klan. We caught the guys, put them in jail. But, I didn't start this work with the idea that somebody's going to harm me. I'm not stupid. But on the other hand, you can't just say time out in the middle of the game. We have tremendous law enforcement support, cooperation. We've been able to deal with these threats pretty well. We have, 24/7 security. And we spend, a tremendous amount of money, well over $1 million a year just on personal security. So it's just part of it, and I'm hoping that some of these people that we've sued, and a lot of them have actually, they've turned evidence for us, they've helped us see that ours is the better way, and I hope that some of these guys, the real haters, and some of the women with them will, turn a leaf in their own life and become good citizens.
And then finally, I'll ask you the final question. Are you optimistic about the future? We hear so much about how the country is so split and so divided.
No, I'm very positive about the country. America's a nation of immigrants. Diversity makes this country great. We're great not in spite of diversity, but because of it. This is a big country. You could double our population, and you could still fly over it and see mainly trees. I mean, we got land that can be used for farming and all. Anglo-white people have an almost zero birth rate. When I started work, 16 people paid my Social Security tax. Now it's less than 3 paying the money for my Social Security. We need people in this country. We need people to work, to grow. When my Irish people came here, they did the ground level jobs, and then later their sons and daughters moved up. And I think the Latinos, who are the biggest minority in this country today, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to end up moving on and growing this nation and making this nation great as they find a place at what I'd like to call America's table.
All right, Morris Dees, the founder and chief trial attorney at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thank you very much and good luck to you.
Hey, man, you're welcome.
Many students from the United States are suddenly finding themselves in Mexico, and a University of Arizona professor is conducting research about them. The professor recently won a Fulbright grant to see how these young people are adapting to significant changes in their lives.
Dr. Norma Gonzalez is a University of Arizona professor in the Teaching, Learning, and Social-Cultural Studies Department. She recently earned a Fulbright grant to study the experiences of U.S.-born and/or educated students now living in the northern region of Mexico. She says this is a phenomenon that has increased dramatically in recent years.
They are very often English dominant. They've had their schooling experiences in Arizona or in the United States. And because of a series of factors, are returning to Sonora and are entering the school systems down there.
This video, produced by education researchers in Mexico, documents the experience of several U.S.-born students being forced to relocate to Mexico. According to Gonzalez, the reasons behind this trend include the economic recession and more stringent anti-immigration laws such as Arizona's SB 1070.
Sonora In the last couple of years, I think right now the latest figures are that there's at least 9,000 students with previous experience in the United States, mostly Arizona, who are in Sonoran schools. And so that's a large demographic.
Gonzalez says students that find themselves pulled out of their familiar academic environment face many challenges, and the process of relocating to a new country can be traumatic.
One young woman, for instance, who was interviewed talked about how her mother came to her school in Arizona, and said, we're leaving. And she felt this sense of loss because she didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her friends or to everyone that she was close to here. So there's always that sense of rupture in terms of going from one place to another. So that's kind of a psychological impact and trauma that the students are dealing with. You know, how did this happen and under what circumstances did it happen?
The circumstances are different for each student, but the academic challenges are similar. Language barriers and curriculum differences put kids at a disadvantage when they arrive to their new school, and they are often placed with younger students.
The teachers see me pretty okay. Once in a while they get frustrated because I can't read something.
The other thing is, you know, fitting in socially and with their peers and their friends. They can be seen as not speaking Spanish the way a Mexican would speak it, and so they're coming from a U.S. context where they were seen as Mexican, and then they're going into a Mexican context where they're not necessarily seen as Mexican. They're seen as outsiders because of the way they speak, the way they dress, just all of these different markers. Where with young people, you know, there's a lot of nuances in terms of identity construction and how they see themselves and how others see them. So identity is a big issue also.
Gonzalez says the phenomenon of U.S.-born and educated students moving to Mexico is relatively new, and she hopes to provide some insight into the transnational experiences of these young people.
I don't think it's really been identified as an area of research until fairly recently. But I think what's interesting about that is that these young people see themselves transnationally. I mean, they see themselves, they are U.S. citizens. They see themselves as returning to the United States, as having transnational futures. And so I think that makes it really important for us to think about how education on both sides of the border can leverage their skills and their knowledge, and not to erase that, to make sure that that's valued and that their futures really do become what they can.
Gonzalez says she will look at how young people use the digital landscape as they navigate their transnational experience. She thinks social networks and other modes of digital expression will allow young people to adapt in ways that are not yet clear.
It could definitely be a benefit if it's nurtured and there's the opportunity for them to see it as that. Sometimes, you know, we don't necessarily value anything that is not part of the dominant narrative, and so it's really important for us to really see all aspects of these students' experiences, because they are coming with ways of seeing the world that are much broader, and they're able to connect with a lot more things. And so we need to, on both sides of the border, value these experiences as something that is pedagogically relevant, and that really brings something to how we think about teaching and learning.
Dr. Gonzalez's Fulbright grant research on U.S.-born and educated students living in Mexico will continue through the year 2013.
Nunca tires la toalla, siempre tratar de acostumbrarte donde vayas y todo el tiempo para el frente, nunca mirar para atrás.
The San Xavier Mission southwest of Tucson is one of the most popular and iconic cultural attractions in our state. Tens of thousands of people visit this facility every year, and many are learning more about it thanks to a committed group of volunteers. Tonight we have an interview about Patronato San Xavier, a nonprofit organization that provides tours of the historic church and is helping with its restoration. Joining us with the details are Executive Director Vern Lamplot and Docent and Education Director Craig Reid. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Vern, I have heard of Patronato San Xavier for years, but a lot of people still don't know exactly what it does. What is its history and what is its mission?
Patronato San Xavier was formed in 1978 by 6 local citizens who were interested both in preserving the church and knowing more about the history of the church. And since that time, in the last 30 or so years, Patronato has raised more than $10 million to restore both the interior and the exterior of the church.
And a couple of years ago, you added a new mission, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, the tours and the docents.
We decided it would be a good time to offer a docent tour, primarily because nothing like that had been done before on a regular basis out there. And in talking with the parish priest, Father Steve Barnewski, we decided that it would be a good fit with operating Catholic Church as it is. And this last 2011, we were able to put together the resources to create the program.
All right. And Craig, so when did you hear about this program, and why did you decide to get involved?
Well, when the first initial press releases went out about the starting of the program, I was very interested. Like a lot of people who've moved here, you go there and there's so much there, and you just want to know more. And I thought this was a great opportunity to get involved in the start.
And since then, you've been a docent and you've been volunteering as the education director?
Yes. We were very lucky early on to attract a lot of people that had a really great background in the church and the history of the mission. Dr. Fontana's done some of the early research there, was very helpful in getting us started and giving us that background. But we knew we needed to have a comprehensive program to train docents for the long run to make this program successful.
And what are some of the qualities that you're looking for, Vern?
Mostly people who have, number one, the time available to perform the tours, and second, an interest in the cultural history of the Southwest. They don't have to know a lot right away, but they have to be interested and willing to apply themselves, because Craig will tell you it's a lot to learn.
So let's talk about that. You will actually sit down with these people who are chosen to be a volunteer. And what do you talk to them about?
Well, we talk about all aspects of it. We talk about the history of the native peoples here, the history of the Spanish people as they arrived, the history of the church, the architecture, the construction, the art that's there, and the symbolism that's present. And there are such great stories connected with this mission that we give people a chance to tell those stories to visitors. And that's really the important thing.
And Vern, obviously, a lot of people cherish this location. They really like this place. Why do you personally find it such a wonderful treasure for this area?
I tell people that all of the stories of how the Southwest came to be are contained in that building. And all you have to do is walk inside and open your eyes. It's an authentic 19th century space, and you walk in and you feel the spirituality and sort of a sense of serenity and contentment the moment you walk inside, and it affects people. You can almost visibly see the effect on them when they walk inside the church and begin looking around. And it's kind of an odd feeling because it is a Baroque church, and Baroque is very counterpoint both in music and in art, and so there's a lot of things going on, and yet it still provokes a sense of serenity in people who come in and look around. And part of the fun of being out there is to be able to tell people about it, tell about its importance, and hopefully by that method we'll be able to help preserve its future.
And I think a lot of us forget, or not me particularly, but some people forget that it is a working parish. It's not just an attraction, right? Not just an old building.
Well, that's an important challenge for us, is to make sure that the tours don't interfere with the actual working of the church, and we try to be very delicate about how we do that to accomplish that.
And you're going to be having a meeting on December 8th, Saturday, December 8th.
We're inviting people that are interested in possibly learning more about the docent program to come to the mission on December 8th. We'll sit down with them, talk to them about what we do. It's not overwhelming. Here's a 500-page book to read by next week. We do it in small bites. We bring people along at their own speed, but we want them to understand the commitment that we're asking for from people to be a part of this program.
And some of the work you're doing is pretty amazing right now. Briefly, you got about nearly 40 docents, and you're providing multiple tours on a daily basis or a weekly basis.
We provide tours every day but Sunday, sometimes up to 6 tours a day, and it's on the San Xavier website what time the tours are given. On busy days, we run tours every half hour. We can get up to 40, 50 people on a tour. We like to do smaller groups because we can interact with them a lot more, but we get a lot of people through there, and it's fun to tell those stories.
All right, Vern, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. We're going to have about 25 seconds here for you to tell me about an effort you're having right now with $3 million.
Well, as I said before, we've raised $10 million so far for the restoration of the church, and there's one major exterior piece that will finish and close off and secure the structure for the future, and that's the East Tower. And those that have gone out there and seen it, you can readily tell the difference between the West Tower and the East Tower. And so that's our next target. The board recently voted to on a $3 million 3-year capital campaign to raise the funds to get that done so that the church will be secure for the future.
All right, well, thank you very much. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
In tonight's video postcard, we take you to Papago Farms, where fall traditions are possible thanks to cooler temperatures. Coming up tomorrow night, we'll talk to award-winning journalist Maria Hinojosa about her new documentary that takes a look at the growing diversity of the United States. I'm Tony Paniagua. Have a great night.